the end of the affair. Well, it's sort of the end of the affair. The human firework that is Boris Johnson may have lit up the sky for the last time, and in the end he has done more good than bad. But whilst his political reign was mesmeric, exciting, compelling and at times hilarious, the lingering aftertaste is one of an historic opportunity squandered and a great talent unfulfilled. There are plenty of positives, many of which will have lingering historic significance. With his stunning and unexpected 2019 landslide victory, Boris kept Jeremy Corbyn out of number 10. Corbyn, someone who presided over a horrific culture of anti-Semitism in his party and failed to condemn Russia over the Salisbury attack. A Corbyn government would have been an economic and national security disaster for this country. In an interview prior to the election, Jeremy Corbyn refused to say whether he would deploy Britain's nuclear weapons if this country were under attack. With his victory in 2019, Boris Johnson spared us 5 years of hard-left ideology and saw the Labour Party return to some form of sanity. And Boris got Brexit done. Yes, he really did. Now, I know Brexit supporters feel it's a compromise, with Northern Ireland thrown under the bus, and with many EU rules and regulations still in place. But the deal that he struck in 2020, a comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU, which we were told was not possible, ended the Brexit deadlock. It's down to Boris and Boris alone that we are out. To have prevaricated and delayed on our departure, watered it down, or even reversed it, which many wanted, well, that would have sparked, in my view, a democratic crisis in this country and possible disorder on the streets. Love it or hate it, Brexit had to happen because people voted for it. That is how democracy works. As he did with London, Boris sparked a feel-good factor across the nation, with an ever-positive view of what we can achieve. This wasn't blind optimism, this was well-founded. Britain, the fifth largest economy in the world, has quite clearly shrugged off the short to medium-term impacts of Brexit, impacts which only a fool would deny. We have boasted the highest growth in the G7 for the last 2 years and signed a flurry of free trade deals. And whilst Germany and the Eurozone descend into recession, we have avoided one. How ironic that Germany, the ideological and economic capital of the EU, should be facing higher food inflation than us and are expected to sit at the bottom of the growth league table in the G7, below, you guessed it, Brexit Britain. Boris was right to sell a positive vision of this country, because Britain is a global beacon of diversity, innovation, creativity, commerce and enterprise. It doesn't fit the narrative to point out that London retains the top European slot for attracting foreign investment in financial services. And Britain is the most attractive country in the whole of Europe to invest in a startup. The list goes on. Now, there is damage from Brexit. Businesses are struggling with red tape and some are hurting. This must be resolved. So there will be bumps in the road for Brexit Britain, of which Boris is the co-author. But in the end, I'm certain that we will go from strength to strength. But, it's abundantly clear that the 80-seat majority and the chance to change Britain for good, forever, was lost amid the chaos of one self-inflicted political scandal after another. And it's my view that although the Partygate story has been wildly overcooked via a press and a House of Commons who loathe Boris because of Brexit, in the end, Johnson ran a chaotic number 10, which inflicted incredibly stupid rules on the British public, which he and his colleagues flagrantly ignored. Why did they ignore the rules? Well, because they knew it was bollocks. Which takes me to the pandemic and Boris's greatest sin, folding to the doom-mongers of Sage by inflicting three national lockdowns on the country. A Conservative Prime Minister whose reaction to a nasty but predominantly mild respiratory virus was to give us communism 2.0, closing once viable businesses, shutting schools and paying perfectly healthy people to stay at home. He masked our faces on evidence flimsier than the devices themselves, and he presided over vaccine tyranny. Given they didn't stop infection or transmission, no one has ever successfully explained to me why we needed to vaccinate perfectly healthy people. I still await an answer. I've always credited Boris for Freedom Day, in which he led Europe out of restrictions, but it was too little too late. It was in January 2022 that the Mail on Sunday reported it was only the intervention of Rishi Sunak, Lord Frost and Jacob Rees-Mogg which stopped Boris Johnson cancelling Christmas in December 2021 with yet more ruinous restrictions, contradicting any vision we may have had of Boris as a true libertarian or lover of freedom. Yes, Sunak wrote the cheques, but Boris Johnson was PM and presided over the borrowing of hundreds of billions of pounds, for which we're now paying a mighty price, not just in terms of inflation and the cost of living, but a deeply poorer and more indebted country. Boris bangs on about how much he loves freedom, but he stuck to the COVID narrative throughout. I'm sorry, but there's no point having principles if you don't lead by them. Boris showed great leadership on Ukraine, and I believe that history will judge this flawed but talented character less harshly than many are today. But in the end, Boris isn't really about the Conservative Party. He's not really about the country. Boris is about Boris. He's the charming narcissist with his own agenda, doing anything and saying anything that serves not the national interest, but the Boris interest. He even decided on Brexit with the toss of a coin and judging the mood of a party which he sought to lead. Now, is there a way back for the blonde bombshell? Never say never. But if a movie has left you disappointed, it's unlikely the sequel will be much better.